Let's get started with this quick zero dilemmas, Rishi. Optimize every page for every customer, or pick a specific area and improve the shit out of that. I must be honest with you. I actually I came up with this question because of actually our last episode. The last episode we had together. So I have a suspicion what you're going to choose, but maybe you change your mind. So let me know. What are you going to pick?
No, I think that the thing to focus on is the point where the decision is made by the buyer. And the reason I mentioned the decision is made by the buyer, because this could change from business to business. There could be certain scenarios where the landing page is where 95% of people are just rejecting your sales pitch. And in that case, I would focus on the landing page. But I think what happens, this is one of the things that I find happens a lot with brands, is there is this kind of tendency to look at CRO as being the wholesale business. And so sometimes I'll talk to clients and I'll say, I want to focus on your best-selling product page. And they would be very convinced by what I'm explaining and all of that. But they would say, but Rishi, our next 5,000 bestsellers also have very similar attributes. Why not just focus on all of them, while we're at it? But I think there is a lot of value that comes from having singular focus. So for me, to answer your question again in simple terms, is focus on that pivotal moment where the make or break happens with the consumer.
Nice one. CRO, or should we use another term?
I like CRO because I believe that as marketers, we need to be where our consumers are. And, as much as CROs are kind of bored with the term CRO, the reality is that CRO is still very much in its infancy. I just posted the other day on LinkedIn that someone I was talking to told me that CRO is where SEO was 20 years ago. So we're still in very, very early stages. And I think as marketers, it's important to use the language of our customers. And my customers use the word CRO to define anything within the realm of conversion optimization. I'm not trying to sell a service to other CROs. I'm trying to sell a service to CEOs.
Yeah, well, and but I think that's also the reasoning from some of the CROs that maybe their clients are not talking about it. So then it might make sense to use another term. But if you say, but all my clients are asking, can you do CRO? Yeah, sure. Then don't change the name they already know, right?
Yeah, I think there's at least a baseline understanding about what CRO is, and then you can kind of educate them from that starting point. Versus, I also think I also think that from a scope perspective, CRO has a very defined scope. And so when a company is thinking about hiring an expert, they always feel comfortable bringing on someone who's going to do just the plumbing for my guest bathroom, versus someone who will come in and can also fix my whole house.
Yeah, exactly. Next one and last one: Bayesian or frequentist?
I'm not a statistician. I just use a statistics tool, and since that statistics tool uses Bayesian statistics, then I will bet my career on that.
Exactly. Nice. Thanks for indulging us with those quick zero dilemmas. Let's dive into the topic, Rishi. Really appreciate you coming on the show for a second time. Definitely for those who haven't listened to it yet, I'll link to the first episode that we had in the show notes. But those that haven't listened to that yet, what's your elevator pitch if someone asks, "Hey Rishi, who are you and what do you do?"
So I call myself the Shopify product page guy, primarily because Shopify is a huge ecosystem. But really, I would say that my whole focus has always been on one singular thing. So I don't look at the overall conversion rate. I'm really looking at okay, where is the consumer making the ultimate decision? And for an e-commerce business, unlike in case of SaaS and in case of other business models, for an e-commerce business, what we find from heat maps and from eye tracking studies is when people first navigate to a website, they are somewhat disoriented. So they are very quickly trying to figure out the hierarchy of the website. and they are very quickly navigating. When we look at their behavior, we notice that they're moving very quickly. And what happens is that when they come to the product page, which is what they navigate to, they come to a grinding halt because we've been trained to know what to expect once you click on the add to cart button. So we know how that movie ends. So what we find is that across all verticals, people are like, when they first come to the landing page or they come to the home page, they are very quickly navigating from there to the category page. They're doing the search, they're coming to the product page. And so therefore, all of the content that we might have put for them higher in the funnel is mostly being ignored. And then when they come to the product page, they are kind of making that difficult decision of, should I buy this product or not? So to me, because that is the point where the decision is being made, that is the point where the consumer has the most amount of anxiety. Because you see, before the product page, I have zero anxiety. If I'm buying a piece of equipment, workout equipment that costs $5,000, I have no anxiety on the homepage. I have no anxiety on the category page. But when I come to the product page, suddenly my cortisol levels go up like crazy because I now know I'm one step away. I'm at the end of the window shopping.
It's going to cost me money.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I think within e-commerce, it's usually relatively simple, right? I mean, the structure of the page, people are used to what an e-commerce page looks like. They know what the flow is going to be, and there's at least there's the expectation of what the flow is going to be, because a lot of people have experienced it a lot of times over and over. And I always get very confused if e-commerce companies are trying to do it very differently, like more like sometimes you encounter this website is more like a very heavy content focused website, a lot of storytelling. I really love storytelling about a lot of brands, but sometimes it's I counted one 2 weeks ago, and I don't remember the brand. It was so heavily focused on content and storytelling, and it was also not based on an e-commerce platform. It was very heavily coded, and sometimes somewhere on the page you could find the shoppable elements, and I was confused as hell with this website as to how the flow of e-commerce works. But normally it's very contained, and for CRO practitioners that work in e-commerce, it's at least the setup is usually fairly straightforward, and same for customers.
And I think you bring up actually a very, very good point. And I think this is something that I'll just touch on because it will relate to what we're going to discuss later on, which is this idea that Guido is not the same as Rishi, and different people have different shopping preferences. And I don't know where I think this comes from the print era, where in print you can only have essentially one version of an ad. You might be able to split test across, but people can't personalize their ads. And I think it comes from there. But to me, it's a huge lost opportunity. I think every platform should be used for what it is good for. And one of the great things about the digital platform is I can do testing at scale. And so when you talk about this website where they are so content heavy and they are focused on the story, what you're really telling us is that that was not the mode that you preferred to be sold to for that website.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to say that it wasn't a good idea, but I was confused, and I think because of my background, I got very curious. I almost sent them. Look them up and send them an email. Hey, I would like to look at your analytics. I would love to know and learn what's happening here and how this is working for you, because I think it's fascinating when you encounter those websites that have a totally different approach.
No, and I think it's a very, very valid point you're bringing out. And so it's a very interesting thing. It isn't just that you have a different personality versus me, but your personality is situationally different from yourself itself for different scenarios.
Yeah.
And so the point I want to make over here is that what brands will typically do is they will survey their customers and they'll say 80% of our customers in our surveys responded that they really are really liked our storytelling. Therefore, let's focus on that. Now, there are two problems here. Number one is this leading question. Marketers tend to have very limited understanding about your background is psychology, so you understand the difficulty with these kind of leading questions. The other problem is that we are using the fact that 80% of people prefer something to say that let 100% of people experience that. And my whole take is that what if we created clever mechanisms where instead of going back to that example you were talking about, instead of showing the entire story up front, what if they showed part of the story and let the user click on something to indicate that they want to see more of the story, and then it would open up situationally for people who were interested in that, and then the other people could actually navigate. I'm just making this up, but I really find it a great opportunity. Even on product pages, different people are looking for different types of information and are looking for different types of persuasion in order to make a purchase decision. And instead of making the page super long, like a Wikipedia article where you are taking care of all the use cases, what if you were to make the page short and to the point, but allow a mechanism for the user to say, hey, I want to learn more about your motor, or I want to learn more about, how this machine will help me lose 20 pounds or whatever it is that they're looking for. I think that's just a much better user experience, and it leads to better conversion rates.
Yeah, and there are even two additional issues with the research that you mentioned. Like the first is that 80%, that's 80% of the people like storytelling, but 80% of the people that responded to the survey. So that might not be everyone anyway. And the second one is that, what people say in surveys and their actual behavior might be quite different. So that's definitely something. That's why we do zero, right? That's why we validate stuff here. So that's, but it's important to keep in mind when seeing those reviews. It's funny or scary how often you see, and I'm sure you see them often too, when you see colleagues from client companies say, okay, we did this survey. This is what came out of it, and then you almost already know for certain. There are some conclusions being drawn here that might not be fully valid, to say the least. Yeah. Rishi, we're here together to talk about 9 psychological variables you can play with when you craft copy on the product detail page. And again, I think we take the product detail page as an example, but like I said, let's keep in mind it should be the page where most people make the buying decision, right? So in e-commerce, let's assume that's the product detail page. But that's an assumption that we make here, and that's something you need to figure out for yourself. That's the assumption that we're going to do here. And then you have 9 psychological principles for us to go through. So my first question for you, why 9? Where did these come from?
That's a really good question. And I have a very tortured answer. We've been actually working on this. We've been working on this list for the last 5 years now. And when we first started the project, our idea was that, look, we've done all of this testing. I've been doing testing and optimization for 13 years now. I think I hold the world record for the most number of failed experiments. But in the process of experimentation, we learned some really interesting insights, and then we started building our understanding almost like we were navigating a forest, and we tried to predict the layout of the forest based on the part that we had explored so far. And so 5 years ago, we said, you know what, instead of just continuing to experiment, why not kind of create a model for the things that we want to experiment around? And so we started off with a list of 7, then we expanded it to 16, then it went to 24, then it came back down to 15. And, we would constantly find new things. We're like, oh, we never accounted for this specific use case. For example, we had a tactic called the power tactic. And the idea of the power tactic was that you want to let the consumer know that they have the power. Like the decision is their decision versus the marketer forcing them to make a decision. And then as we started maturing, we realized that some of these tactics could be bundled. It's almost like finding a periodic table, exactly the same mechanism. We knew that there was a bunch of tactics out there, but we didn't know what they were, and we were trying to fit them, and we would have to rearrange all the time. So when you ask the question of where the 9 came about, the 9 came about as the result of 5 years of tears, where we cried to bed every night, and then we eventually came up with the stable list. And for the last 2 years, this list has been completely stable. So I feel optimistic that it will remain stable, but it could change.
So that doesn't mean that you're not crying yourself to sleep anymore. Now that you have these 9, you're not crying.
It's actually, this is the reason I feel very optimistic, is that I have had no panic attacks about the list, because the challenge of the list is that when you update it, we have to then reformulate our entire process. So it's very complicated, but we haven't had any such issues. One thing I should also mention here for the listeners is that, first of all, that I know that your listeners are broad, so it's not just e-commerce practitioners. So I want to basically say that, look, this 9-point process applies to all types of scenarios. We've worked with B2B businesses, we've worked with B2C companies. I think the same principles apply. There are 2 things that I should mention over here that are very, very important. The first is that this entire copywriting process is geared towards converting first-time buyers. This is a very important point. It's not designed for upsells and cross-sells, increasing your average order value. This is specifically formulated to convert first-time buyers. And I just want to give that context for listeners so that when they're thinking about this, they're thinking about it from that perspective. The other thing is that it's based on the fact that if you look at your analytics data, at least for my website and for all of my clients that I work with, the return rate typically is less than 20%. So what that means is that we have one shot in which we need to communicate our value proposition to the buyer. Now, for certain types of B2B businesses, their return rates are much, much higher. So they could have like a 40-50% return rate. So again, these principles might not apply perfectly. So I just want to qualify, this works for business websites where the return rate is relatively low, under 20%, and it's designed for websites or businesses where they are trying to improve conversion rates of first-time buyers.
Yeah, I guess as always, and that's also from what I'm hearing, that's also how you use it. It's inspiration for optimization, right? And then you still need to validate if it actually works. As always. Okay, good. So we have 9 principles to go through. Let's see if we can. We have like 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes for each.
This is perfect. Yeah. So basically, the genesis of this is that as people are navigating the web, we are. I think I read somewhere, this cannot be validated, but I read somewhere that the average consumer is exposed to 1,000 ads a day, which is just a mind-boggling number. And the reality is that our brains were not equipped to process this volume of information. So what has happened is that our brains are incredibly smart at conserving energy. And so they've developed these mechanisms to navigate what I would call the neon maze that we are all living in. And so we don't when I see an ad for a treadmill, or I see an ad for a supplement, I'm not going there and doing a scientific analysis of that supplement versus other supplements and doing a cost-loss analysis. I'm making a snap judgment. And so in that process, we've developed these shortcuts to navigate the world. And so this 9 list is based on those shortcuts. So let's start off with the first one, which is people are skeptical of too good to be true. So we are living in a world where I don't think in the history of mankind there's been more marketing that is coming towards consumers. And so what has happened is that what happens in marketing is that marketing is all hyperbolic. These are the best running shoes in the history of the world. This is the best plastic cup ever created. And so obviously that's not true. And obviously that's a marketer kind of, being colorful with language. But the problem for consumers is that they cannot possibly make a purchase decision simply based on the fact that some Nike is saying that, these are the best running shoes, because Nike two weeks ago was saying another shoe was the best running shoe. And so they're very skeptical about this. So whenever they encounter something, even if it's objectively true, and this is a really important point, even if your product is 30% lighter than the next running shoe, by just simply saying it's 30% lighter can still trigger the too good to be true feeling in the mind of the buyer. So what you need to do is you need to go through an entire sales pitch and say, is there anything that we are saying at any point that might be too good, be perceived as being too good to be true? And if that is found, you need to add more context to it. That's all. For example, if your shoes are truly 20% lighter, you can say in parentheses, you can say, validated by, in a third party lab or something, some kind of context. And so when I say that people are skeptical of too good to be true, this is the other mistake people make, is they are focused only on the big, bold headlines and saying, okay, let's make sure our headline is not categorized as too good to be true. Actually, this works even for very subtle things. So just go through your entire sales pitch and ask yourself, is there anything that we're saying at any point that even remotely sounds too good to be true? If you find it, give some qualifying context around it. And that's the whole idea behind point one.
Nice. And I think, I think that's it applies to this one, but I think it applies to many of the points in your list. These are especially questions that are good points that you can try to figure out with user research, right? Because these are things. This is perception by your client. You're saying, okay, what is too good to be true? But I can imagine it's quite hard for you as the person that created this product or is marketing this product. It's really hard for you to say, okay, yeah, this is too good to be true. Or, well, if you know that you're lying, then it's then it's clear. But assuming you're a good of faith and trying to sell something, I think that's hard to judge. So yeah. To me, this seems like a perfect questions to check with actual clients through user research.
Absolutely.
Yeah, nice. Second one, they find expertise sexy.
We are living in a hyper specialized world. So if I have a heart condition and I want to go to a doctor, I don't want to just go to a cardiologist. I want to go to the best cardiologist in the world who is accepting patients and is operating 20 miles away or 20 kilometers away from where I live. So consumers have really kind of become very, very, very specific in their expectations about what they want. They want the best for their price point that is available to them. And therefore, this idea of expertise has become more and more important. 20 years ago, or our parents, they would buy groceries in a very general grocery store. Now my wife goes to a very specific grocery store for a very specific type of organic items that she's looking for. She goes to another grocery store for different kind of shelf, long-term items. And so their consumers are looking for expertise. And so the idea here is obviously how do you express that expertise across your entire sales pitch? It's not just about demonstrating expertise about one attribute about your product at a specific location. It is a style of writing where when the reader is reading it, they should feel like they are dealing with an uber expert. So if you are selling a product that is a treadmill or a workout equipment, you need to demonstrate your expertise, not just around the mechanics of how those machines work, but your expertise in terms of understanding the dynamics of health, understanding the dynamics of habits and all of those things, because all of that combined is what's going to give this buyer the confidence to pull the trigger.
Yeah, and then you need to figure out how important is the expertise factor for this specific customer for this specific product. I can imagine. I really relate to the expertise is sexy. I really like the idea of me going to a specialized cheese shop for the cheese and for the nuts that I really like, especially macadamia nuts. I like to go to a specialized shop for that. But in practice, I just go to the supermarket and buy my cheese. That's over there because it's way more convenient. So and that's, you need to figure out how these relate. But for other products, it might be that the expertise wins out miles compared to convenience.
This is a really good point. So I think what you're saying is 100% accurate. The point, the only qualification I would give is that, remember, these people who are on your product page are already on your website. So it's not like, you're talking about if the consumer hasn't even left the house and they've decided to go to a grocery. I'm saying that these people are already here. So I'm saying, now that they're here, make sure you're telling them that, you're an expert.
Exactly. Nice one. Yeah. People root for people who beat the odds.
I don't think there's going to be any book. This is the only tactic of ours where I'm confident that there is nobody else who's identified this as a tactic. But this kind of goes to, this kind of really connects to my mythology, the mythology part of my, so I'm very interested
David and Goliath?
Yeah, David and Goliath. I'm very interested in, hero's journey, hero with 1,000 faces. Joseph Campbell is a very famous American linguist who talks about this idea of across different cultures, how we have these hero's journeys. And basically the idea is that there is something about the human spirit where we are really drawn, and this is across cultures, by the way. It's not just an American phenomena. This is a universal phenomena. We are very much drawn to people who've overcome obstacles. And there are two types of obstacles we focus on. These are internal obstacles. So that's what you talked about, the external obstacle and internal obstacle. David versus Goliath is an external obstacle. But an internal obstacle could be the Rocky story, right? Where here's a flawed human being who is trying to better himself. And so what we like to do is when we tell the story on our product pages, we want to kind of communicate this idea to the buyer, obviously based on what is true for the brand. So,
yeah, I think the hero's journey is a well-known storytelling tactic, right? So
correct.
That's something that you can use to e-commerce as well. Nice. Number 4, consumers are fascinated by surprising details.
So
I assume you're not talking about the price being very high.
No. Yeah, no, no. That's actually the opposite effect. The idea here is that, how do I give a consumer something of value before they pull out their credit card? And so I really like the idea of edutainment, where you are educating the buyer. So even if they don't buy my treadmill, I've told them about, the human body but the thing is, it creates a halo effect where they probably will buy from us, but the consumer is now getting value for free. So I like to inject this, and this also has another benefit, which is that when you construct sales copy, the reality is that the only person who likes long sales copy is me. No consumer wants to read 20 paragraphs worth of content. So what happens is that by injecting interesting details across your sales page, it's almost like a Kit Kat break. You're giving the buyer a little mini break to give them something very interesting, which was counterintuitive. And that's the thing. It has to be something counterintuitive, like something that they didn't expect. So if you are selling a treadmill, it can be a very interesting fact about, for example, the human leg has, 110 bones or something. I'm making this up. Something that's on brand, but also knowledge for the buyer. But it also has the benefit, like I said, of giving the consumer a energy break, which we then can use for them to continue reading our sales page. Because remember, as a copywriter, my goal is not to improve conversion rates. Of course, that's my ultimate goal. My primary goal is to make sure that the buyer continues reading my sales pitch. So if the buyer leaves midstream with my sales pitch, I'm pretty much guaranteed that they won't buy from me.
Yeah, I guess most people like novelty. That's nice. So if you can tell, and I think it also, if it's believable, then it creates some form of trust, right? So they're educating me. They're trying to make me a better person already without me even buying stuff. So and that's I guess the reciprocity principle that you would like to return the favor, and hopefully by buying stuff. But give me some free information, educate me in a good way, and then I'll start loving you even more. Number 5, consumers are visual animals.
50% of our cortex is devoted to image processing. And so the question is, how do we use copywriting to evoke images in the mind of the buyer? And so there's obviously there are lots of principles like the endowment effect, where if you feel you own something, you automatically feel closer to it, you feel more attached to it. So really the principle here is that how do I, as a copywriter, if I'm selling a treadmill, one of the biggest challenges for a copywriter is the fact that there is a disconnect between my sales page and when the consumer will actually get to benefit from that product, because there's shipping involved. That's the problem. But if I, as a copywriter, can write copy in a way where the reader feels like they're actually already owning the treadmill, it goes deeper in their psyche. And so we like to visualize. We can visualize, for example, positive and negative. So a negative visualization could be something like, imagine your life if you chose not to work out for the next 20 years. What would happen? And that would be a negative visualization. But these really deeply affect the psychology of the buyer.
Yeah, nice one. Yeah, it always reminds me of the question that's went around a lot in my teens. If you had to choose, or if something terrible would happen to your brain, would you rather lose sight or lose hearing? For me, actually always was an obvious question. I would rather lose hearing than lose any visual anything on the visual side. But then when I started, and that's just a personal preference, of course. But when I started studying psychology, and if you just look at how the brain, where the brain areas are, and if you just look at the sheer size of the brain that is dedicated to vision versus hearing, it's very obvious what's apparently more important to your brain, and it's not hearing. And I'm not saying it's not important, of course. It is very emotionally way more important, I think, the hearing part. But practically for getting around, and apparently for your brain and survival, vision is really important. And that's, I guess, also what the animal part in your statement comes from. It's
That's right.
very historically motivated and structured thing. Number 6, consumers need motivation to break habits. It doesn't happen by itself, I guess.
That's right. And the thing is that, there is no product that has been invented. All the jobs that you can think about have already pretty much been taken care of. So what that means is that when a consumer is buying a treadmill, they are not choosing between other treadmills. They're choosing between the choice of not working out at all, or maybe they were going for a run outside and the treadmill is a replacement for that. And so they always can default to continuing to do what they were always doing. And this is the reason why, you can write the most compelling sales pitch in the world. If you don't give the buyer a compelling path from where they are to where you want them to be in terms of making a purchase, they will not stop their old habits. And so that's the whole idea. It's actually, I would say, of all of the tactics, number 6 is the most important, because if you don't give people a motivating reason to fire what they were doing previously and hire what you are asking them to do, your sales pitch is meaningless.
Yeah, it's also an important one to keep in mind. Your product can be better than that of the competition, but if they're already using the competition, it needs to be way better. And it cannot be just a slight improvement, because people won't change for that. You need to have really motivated people, because basically we're lazy. Right? There's a big risk involved, big perceived risk involved in changing your habits. Your habits are there for a reason, and that's also what your brain assumes. Even if you don't know the reasons anymore, you made this choice before for a reason. And that's, you just want to stick to them. Number 7, consumers love personalized experiences.
So this again kind of goes back to the idea that, as a copywriter, I must write in, I've seen some, I'll give you an example. There's a sports product that I saw, and the ad said that this product is perfect for both amateurs and professionals. And that actually is a big turnoff for me. If I'm an amateur, I actually don't want a product that is designed for professionals. If I'm a professional, I don't want to buy a product that was designed for an amateur. And so the idea here is more about optics. It's not about anything else, but it's about giving the reader the perception that I want to give the reader the feeling that I've hacked their brain and I completely understand I understand where they're coming from and who they are. And I want to write copy in a way where they feel like I really understand them. And that's the whole purpose of this idea of point number 7.
Yeah, nice. Number 8, consumers like knowing that they've stumbled onto something rare?
So this kind of goes back to this idea that nobody wants to buy a commodity. Even if you're selling a commodity, we don't want to feel like we're buying a commodity. And so the idea is, how do I evoke the feeling that you are different? This is kind of goes back to exclusivity. Like, the consumers want to know, I want to buy things that I know that everyone doesn't have access to. We're kind of selfish that way. So how do I communicate that idea? So for example, if I was selling a premium organic dog food supplement, I would say something like, less than 1% of American households or European households invest in organic supplements for their dog. And just that statement, for this person who's on this page, who's thinking about buying this product, suddenly feels like, oh, wow, I'm in that minority of super caring dog parents. And so that's the whole idea. People want to know what they are about to buy is a rare and unique thing for them.
But how, can you also apply this, or would you also apply this to something that's by definition like a commodity? Like, I don't know, if you're an online supermarket, almost by definition, everything you're selling is a commodity. So can you still apply this somehow, or does it only apply to the more premium products?
No, I think you can apply it. For example, if I'm a grocery store, and I think you can definitely apply it. I think the basic idea here is that you're giving the buyer the dopamine hit of them having, like, for example, if I'm a grocery store, I could say something like, like, these olives, we're the only grocery store that has these olives, or something like that, and that gives that buyer the dopamine hit of saying, oh, wow, I'm so lucky I walked to this aisle today, because I wasn't, I wouldn't have come here.
Yeah.
That kind of idea.
Yeah. I guess with commodities, there can always be some differentiation within the category. Maybe not in general, it's hard to do, but within the category,
Correct.
You have milk, and they all have milk, but this is special milk from these local farmers that's very sustainable, and these kind of things, and then make it special that way. Nice. The last one, number 9, we must resolve their negative thoughts.
So this is it's kind of the exact opposite of number 1, which is too good to be true. So too good to be true is where the marketer is saying something and the buyer is like, oh, you are full of BS, and I'm going to discount what you're saying. Must resolve negative thoughts is just the opposite feeling, where the consumer, this is the reality, as the consumer goes through the sales pitch, they are having all of these questions that are bubbling in their minds. And the job of the copywriter is to anticipate what those questions are and address those questions. Because, let me ask you this question. If someone gets to the bottom of the sales pitch and they still have unresolved questions, what are they going to do, Guido? What is your guess as to what the consumer will do?
Wait.
That's
Don't
right.
make a decision right now.
That's exactly right. They will defer judgment, and they will say something like, I don't have all the information I need to buy this treadmill today. I'll come back after a couple of days when I've got more time. And again, if you go back to your analytics data, in the case of my clients, everyone has less than 20% return rate. That's a very bad odd for me to kind of rely on. And so what we need to do is we need to anticipate all of those negative questions. So simple things, for example, I want to give a simple example. Let's say that your shipping is not free. Let's say for whatever reason you're paying for shipping. A lot of times when brands have bad news, the way they deal with it is they either bury the bad news or they don't talk about it at all. And my whole idea is that why not get in front of it? So what you could do is you could say that we charge for shipping because we pay for shipping. And the moment you say that, the consumer like, yeah, that kind of makes sense, or you could say something like, we care deeply about the packaging of the product. So we actually invest a lot in packaging because we want to make sure that when you get it to your home, there is no chance that something is broken. The consumer's like, oh yeah, it makes sense for me to spend $20 for shipping if that's what I'm getting. But when you pretend like shipping is not a concern, you're actually leaving that negative thought unresolved.
Yeah, it actually reminds me of, I did a couple of experiments exactly on this, because in the user research, we found out a couple of people were surprised about shipping costs later on in the process, beyond the product detail page. And when there some other people did see the shipping costs because they were listed on the product detail page, but they were like, hidden below some product information, and some people actually commented on that during user research, saying, okay, you're trying to hide this, and now I don't trust you anymore. I don't like that. And we actually, so the experiment was to move the shipping cost, and we didn't even do the fancy stuff that you just mentioned, like explaining why you have shipping cost. We just simply moved the shipping cost, and it was just like it was a very simple line, like shipping cost, and then the amount, and we just moved that to directly below the price of the product, and it increased conversions.
Awesome.
So we have gone through our 9 points. What can we expect for the next year? How many points are you going to add or remove here?
I really would actually. I would like to remove 2 if I can. I would like to further simplify it to maybe 7 core tactics. But please don't. You're bringing very bad visions in my. You're visualizing very bad ideas in my head.
Rishi, thank you so much for joining us again for some great contact and sharing that with us. I'd love to have you on the show, and let me know if you have any other lists. I think it's really fascinating what you do with the specialization. And I guess that's also one point of the list, right? We like to go for the specialist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Thanks so much. Final question for you. Who in the CRO field should we interview for the CRO Cafe podcast? Who's the person that you've been watching lately on I don't know, on LinkedIn or wherever you are, on Twitter, that you say, hey, you should interview those people, those persons?
Have you interviewed Chad Sanderson?
Yes.
Oh, he's such a good one.
So he's lately he's very focused on data models, right? And data contracts. And we didn't speak about that topic specifically. So maybe a good one to invite him over to talk about that.
Yeah, there's another person. His name is Shiloh Jones, and I can send you his contact information. And Shiloh is, what I really, really admire about him is that he's been involved in the e-commerce space now for 20 years. He's more involved in he is in the PPC space. But what I really like about him is that just his broad knowledge about the evolution of e-commerce. He's a really smart guy. So.
Nice. Well, I only interview smart people, so.
Yeah.
Rishi, thank you so much. Love talking to you, and hope to talk to you again soon. Let me know if you have something.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.